Charlie Parker's name sparks electricity in the very bones of jazz. Born into modest beginnings on August 29, 1920, in Kansas City, Kansas, Parker, affectionately known as Bird or Yardbird, would go on to redefine music as it was known. His alto saxophone became not just an instrument, but a voice that cut through limitations, expectations, and eventually time itself. His genius was matched only by his tragic fall, and together they tell one of the most enthralling stories in the history of American music. Charles Christopher Parker, Jr. grew up on the Missouri side of Kansas City, a city bursting with the rhythm of jazz and the fervor of gospel. His mother, Addie, worked long nights for Western Union to support her son after his father, a once promising entertainer turned Pullman cook, abandoned the family during Parker's early teens. By the time he was 11, Parker had discovered music, and it wasn't long before he held his first saxophone, a second-hand alto that would soon become an extension of his very soul. He first played baritone horn in school bands, but quickly gravitated to the alto sax. At 14, he joined the Lincoln High School band and began developing his craft with an intensity few could match. Inspired by the city's musical giants, Lester Young, Count Basie, Benny Moten, Parker fell under the spell of improvisation. But it wasn't talent alone that built the boy into a marvel. Parker claimed he practiced as much as 15 hours a day, pushing through failure with an obsessive commitment to improvement. A defining moment arrived in 1936 when Parker, still a teenager, stepped onto the stage for a jam session with Count Basie's band. Eager, overconfident, and musically underprepared, he lost track of the chord changes. In a dramatic flourish of dismissal, drummer Joe Jones removed a cymbal and hurled it at Parker's feet, prompting laughter from the audience. Many would have crumbled. Parker instead transformed the scorn into fuel. He vanished into practice rooms, basements, and woodsy retreats, emerging a year later with a renewed arsenal of technique and vision. Parker married young, proposing to Rebecca Ruffin when he was just 16. Though their marriage ended after 3 years, worn thin by Parker's burgeoning heroin dependency, they had 2 children. During this period, Parker also survived a car crash en route to a Missouri resort gig, breaking 3 ribs and injuring his spine. Yet even this brush with death could not keep him from music. Instead, it pushed him deeper into woodshedding, refining the musical language that would soon turn jazz inside out. By 1938, he joined Jay McShann's Territory Band and quickly rose to lead the reed section. In 1940, Parker made his recording debut with McShann, impressing with solos on tracks like Hootie Blues and Confessing the Blues. On tour, the band played in white-only clubs, but backstage Parker began forming relationships that would define the next era of music, including a friendship with a young trumpeter named Dizzy Gillespie. Parker's restless curiosity drove him to seek new forms of expression. In 1939, in a fateful jam session with guitarist Biddy Fleet, he discovered that the higher intervals of a chord could be used melodically, with related harmonies anchoring them. This revelation cracked open the door to what would become bebop. Bebop wasn't just a new style, it was a rebellion. Where swing had smooth rhythms and danceable tunes, bebop darted with complexity, played at breakneck speed, and thrived on improvisational daring. Parker and Gillespie experimented in Harlem's after-hours clubs, jamming with Thelonious Monk, Kenny Clark, and Bud Powell. Together they created something completely new. By 1945, Parker's collaborations with Gillespie were drawing crowds. That year he led his first Savoy record session, producing the landmark tracks Coco, Now's the Time, and Billy's Bounce. These weren't merely recordings, they were sonic earthquakes. The duo's short tour in Los Angeles, however, ended in disarray, with Parker remaining behind. Out of heroin, he turned to alcohol. It was a descent that would culminate in a mental breakdown, an arrest, and a 6-month stay at Camarillo State Mental Hospital. Released from Camarillo in early 1947, Parker seemed rejuvenated. Before returning to New York, he recorded Relaxin' at Camarillo, a sly nod to his institutional stay. Once home, he reassembled a quintet featuring Miles Davis and Max Roach, recording extensively for Savoy and Dial. These years yielded many of his finest recordings, blistering, elegant, and unlike anything previously heard. His friendship with producer Norman Granz in 1949 opened new doors. At last, Parker fulfilled a long-standing desire to perform with a string section. The session produced Charlie Parker with Strings, a dream realized, showcasing his love for classical music. Far from softening his music, the strings provided a contrast that made his phrasing shimmer. Europe beckoned in 1949 and 1950, where he found both acclaim and freedom. In Paris, he was treated as royalty. The Americans, he noted wryly, seemed slower to appreciate what he was doing. While Parker's music reached new heights, his personal life slid into chaos. He never divorced Rebecca Ruffin, but went on to marry twice more, Geraldine Scott in 1942 and later Doris Snyder in 1948. Neither marriage lasted, worn down by financial instability and Parker's addictions. In the early 1950s, Parker lived with Chan Richardson, who took his surname and bore him two children, Pree and Baird. The death of his daughter Pree in 1954, at just 3 years old, broke him. Already reeling from the wear of addiction, grief pulled him deeper into despair. He attempted suicide twice that year, swallowing iodine in a frantic act of desperation. He was hospitalized again and spent months trying to recover. Parker continued to perform despite the turmoil. In 1953, he played one of his most storied concerts at Massey Hall in Toronto, alongside Gillespie, Charles Mingus, Bud Powell, and Max Roach. Though sparsely attended, overshadowed by a boxing match, the performance was incandescent. By the end of 1954, however, Parker was unraveling. He was banned from Birdland, the club named in his honor. Gigs were lost. His cabaret card had previously been revoked due to drug charges, and though reinstated, the damage to his reputation was irreversible. On March 4, 1955, Parker played what would be his final public performance. A week later, on March 12th, while staying with jazz patroness Baroness Pannonica de Königswarter, he collapsed watching television. He refused medical attention. His body, ravaged by pneumonia, ulcers, and cirrhosis, gave out. A coroner, unaware of his true age, guessed he was at least 55. He was only 34. His death ignited confusion and controversy. His common-law wife Chan wasn't informed until days later. His estranged wife Doris and his mother decided he would be buried in Missouri, against his wishes to be laid to rest in New York. Even his headstone bore mistakes, listing the wrong date and depicting a tenor saxophone instead of his signature alto. Friends and fans in Harlem mourned him with a grand procession. Dizzy Gillespie paid for the funeral, yet the sorrow was mixed with outrage. Here was a man whose artistry had shaken the foundation of jazz, dead before his time, left to suffer the ravages of racism, addiction, and institutional neglect. Parker's approach to melody, rhythm, and harmony reshaped jazz. He didn't merely play over changes, he wove new fabrics through them. His phrasing was angular yet lyrical, unpredictable, yet rooted in deep musical logic. He favored long, cascading lines that defied categorization. He developed a technique of composition known as contrafact, writing new melodies over existing chord progressions. Ornithology, built on How High the Moon, and Coco, rooted in Cherokee, remain masterclasses in this approach. His so-called bird changes altered the familiar 12-bar blues into something uniquely his own, evident in pieces like Blues for Alice. Beyond technical brilliance, Parker brought an emotional vocabulary few had articulated through jazz, There was urgency, defiance, whimsy, pain, all spinning out of his horn at once. His solos felt like confessions, sometimes hysterical, other times mournfully poetic. Parker was lionized even as he fell apart. He became a hero to the Beat generation, a totem for hipsters who saw in his refusal to conform a model for artistic freedom. But the cost of that freedom was enormous. He was haunted by inner demons that no applause could quiet. Yet for all the chaos, his music remains. Dizzy Gillespie once said, "You can tell the history of jazz in 4 words: Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker." Miles Davis called him the guy who changed everything. Charlie Parker didn't live to see how deeply he would shape the future, but musicians from John Coltrane to Ornette Coleman, from Sonny Rollins to Cannonball Adderley, carried pieces of his voice into new realms. His improvisations are still dissected, studied, revered. The bird lives on, not in statues or ceremonies, but in every saxophone wail that challenges convention, in every late-night jam that dares to rewrite the rules. His story is a triumph, a tragedy, and above all, a reminder that music, at its highest peak, is born from truth, no matter how unbearable it may be.